Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we will be discussing all things heat embossing. So let's talk about heat embossing and how we can become successful when applying embossing powder to our cards. I think that it's a great addition to cards. I feel like it makes images stand out in cards. Doesn't mean you always have to do it, but I think it's a nice touch. Now, heat embossing does come with some prep, and what I am going to show is what I find to be successful for me. Doesn't mean that it is the end-all be-all way to do it. It's just what I found to be successful when I am heat embossing. So there are a few things or a few tools that you need in order to successfully heat emboss. What you're going to need is an embossing tool, a heat gun. You're going to need an anti-static powder tool. You're going to need your embossing powder, and you're also going to need some form of clear sticky ink, Watermark ink, any ink that is not going to dry as fast as dye ink, because you need the ink to be able to stay wet long enough to apply your powder. Oh, and here comes a friend. Hi, bub. How's it going? Are you going to teach them how to heat emboss? Yeah, you good boy. Thank you. Okay, so there's Blue's nose. Okay, buddy. Oh, thank you for the loves. Thank you for the loves. Okay. Hey, buddy. Blue's going to teach on how to heat emboss. Bubs, I'm trying to do a video. I know it. Oh, thank you. I know it. Can we get down? Oh, buddy. Thank you. All right. Okay, get down, buddy. Thanks. Okay, back to heat embossing. I know, you're a good boy. So a few of those items would be a heat gun. You are going to need a heat tool to melt your embossing powder. You're going to need an anti-static powder tool to remove any static from your cardstock. This will also allow for the embossing powder to only stick to your stamped image. You're going to need your embossing powder, and you're also going to need a clear sticky ink. You could also use pigment ink, since it does take a little bit longer to dry because of that pigment property. I wouldn't recommend using dye ink because dye ink dries almost instantly, so it doesn't allow for the powder to have time to stick to your stamped image. You could also use an ink dauber for larger surface areas. There are also ink pens for getting into small spaces or for those who have awesome penmanship. This is a great tool. It's dual-ended. Super handy to have. So when we're talking about heat embossing, we always want to prep our card. And why are we prepping? We're prepping because we want to make sure that the powder only sticks to our stamp image. So in order to do that, you do need an anti-static powder tool. Tailored Expressions is my favorite tool because it's not messy and this container is refillable. You're literally going to remove the cap and just run your anti-static powder tool all over the front of your card or all over the surface of whatever it is you're trying to heat emboss on. They also have a powder bag, which is another tool that I use every once in a while, but I will say that you do need to have some sort of carrying case. Otherwise, the powder will get everywhere because it's literally just a bag full of powder and it doesn't come with its own carrying case. So I would recommend, if you do go this direction, make sure you have something to house it in. Oh, and you basically just take the bag and run it all over your card front. Now, those tools are great, but I also want to share a tool that is not my favorite, and that is the EK Tools anti-static powder tool. I don't even know if that's the name. I just know it's by EK Success, and it's a tool that I absolutely do not like. And why I don't like this tool is because it's very difficult to get the powder out of the container. This tool, the bristles actually come quite a bit longer, and I cut them because I thought that that would help with, I thought that would help remove the powder from the tool, but it actually doesn't. So I found myself having to unscrew the top to get my powder out. And I just felt that the amount of money I invested in this tool, I shouldn't have to do that, which is why I don't like it and I don't recommend it. Some crafters have success with this tool. So again, it is personal preference. That this is just my experience. So as soon as I'm done using all the powder, the container will get recycled. So I'm going to bring in my Misti. I already have a clear stamp in here. I'm going to tuck this into my Misti. Again, because I am touching this, I am going to take my anti-static powder tool and I'm going to reapply that. So I am going to use Watermark ink. You're going to take your ink and ink up your stamp. I'm going to do mine twice. The nice part about having the powder is you could actually see your stamped image, and you can tell if you've got a great impression or not, or if maybe you need to reapply some ink because you missed a spot. Whatever the case may be, right? Okay, so I'm going to remove this out of my Misti. Now it's time to apply the powder. There are many different versions of embossing powder. Lawn Fawn has their version of embossing powder. This just so happens to be glow in the dark. Gina K Designs has fine detailed embossing powder. This is the same, just in white. Simon Says Stamp has their ultra fine embossing powder. This is in the color silver. And Altenew has their version of embossing powder. This is antique gold. Distress has their embossing glaze, which is not opaque. This is translucent, but it pairs nicely with their Distress ink line. So, when applying your powders, you could either keep them in the jar, have dedicated larger containers to house their embossing powders. All personal preference. I use both. In this case, we're going to use our Simon Says Stamp Ultra Fine Silver Embossing Powder. I'm going to bring in some scrap paper, put down my stamped image, and I'm going to pour my powder all over my stamped image. Right? Sometimes I'll run it over again. And so, as an example, there's embossing powder in areas that I don't want, right? If I didn't apply my anti-static powder tool, this is how this would look, and it would be very hard to remove that powder. But because I have anti-static powder all over my cardstock, I can easily just knock it away. Now, every once in a while, you'll have rogue powder. And the easiest way to remove it is to take a dry paintbrush and just gently wipe it away. I will take my scrap paper, and this is what's going to help me funnel my powder back into my container. So, before I apply heat to my embossing powder, the first thing that I want to do is make sure that my heat gun is nice and hot. And the reason I do that is because that is what's going to help prevent warping of my paper. You'll still get a little warping, but it won't be as dramatic. Another tip that I'd like to share is when I emboss, I also like to slightly bend my cardstock. Again, I do this to help with the warping. Another thing you also want to do that I noticed is super helpful, apply heat to the back side, and that'll kind of help straighten out the paper. Again, the goal is to prevent a ton of warping, but warping is inevitable. It's just part of heat embossing. And so now that my heat tool is hot, I am going to apply heat to the powder. Okay, so before I finish heat embossing, I want to show you what this would look like. You want to continuously move the tool, and the reason why you want to do that is because you don't want to burn your embossing powder. And what I mean by burning is just overheating the powder. And so when you overheat powder, what happens is that three-dimensional look that you get when embossing and the shininess that you receive, when you overheat that, it goes away, and then you have to start all over. So you can tell when your embossing powder has melted because you get the shiny raised look. If your embossing powder was not fully heated, it's still granular. You can still that it's super grainy and it's not shiny. And that's how you can tell what has been embossed and what hasn't. And so if you see that your embossing powder isn't fully embossed, you want to make sure to not apply heat to what has already been embossed, because again, you can overheat it. You just want to concentrate and continuously move over the areas that haven't been melted. And there we go. And so again, even though I did my best to prevent a ton of warping, if you look at my paper, it's still a little bit warped, but it's not as bad as if I didn't prep my heat tool. Now I'll go ahead and I'll show you what it'll look like if I overheat my embossing powder. So if you overheat your embossing powder, you lose that dimension, and you kind of lose really the shininess of it. Can you see the difference? I know in person you can see it. It might be harder to pick it up on camera. So again, you kind of lose that 3D dimension, and you also kind of lose the shininess. And so if this ever happens, what you can do is you can put this back into your Misti, re-stamp your image, apply your powder, and reheat it. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to throw away your project because you either overheated or, well, really it would be overheating it, because if you didn't fully emboss, you can just apply your heat and finish off the embossing. Okay, so that is kind of just my tips and tricks. Again, I do this all the time, so if I've missed a step, or if you have questions, or I forgot to throw it into the video, leave your questions in the comments below, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all you guys hanging in there. I would love it if you like and subscribe to my channel. To all my existing subscribers, again, I just want to say time and time again, thank you for your support. It means a lot to me. And until next time, bye.